Have you ever felt betrayed by those you trusted most? I did when a corrupt HOA tried to pull off the biggest scam of my life, and I wasn't about to let them win. I still remember the chill that ran down my spine the day I received the certified letter. I'd only recently taken over the small, weathered farmhouse in Maple Grove, a place my grandparents had lovingly nurtured for over 50 years. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the fog clings to the fields and the leaves whisper secrets of the past. I was still getting used to the idea of leaving behind my busy city life for the solace of the countryside when the letter arrived. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, a clerical error from the Sycamore Ridge Homeowners Association, HOA. But as I read the bold, official text, my heart sank. The HOA was claiming ownership of the mineral rights beneath my farm. They intended to start excavating for limestone deposits hidden deep under the fertile soil, something my grandfather had never even mentioned in all his years of tending the land. I couldn't believe it. The very thought that someone could come and dig up the earth of our family homestead without our consent was preposterous. I had grown up on this land. Every tree, every stone, every patch of dirt was a part of my heritage. The letter claimed that my grandfather had signed over those rights 2 years ago. 2 years ago? I remembered him as a steadfast man who would rather work the land than ever part with it. Something wasn't adding up. I immediately dialed the number printed on the letter. A curt voice answered, Margaret Holloway, the president of the HOA. I explained my confusion, my voice trembling as I said, there must be some mistake. My grandfather would never sign anything like this. But Margaret's tone was icy and unyielding. The documents are in order, and the geological survey has confirmed significant deposits on your property. The excavation will begin in just a few short weeks, she insisted before abruptly ending the call. Determined to uncover the truth, I drove down to the county records office the very next day. The office was a small, aging building with dusty files and an air of neglect. I introduced myself to Frank, a kindly clerk with reading glasses who had seen more than his fair share of property disputes. Together, we sifted through decades of paperwork until we reached the deed from 1965, the document that should have sealed my family's claim to the land. There it was, printed in careful, legal script, a clear statement that the mineral rights were to remain with the property, with no mention of any separate transfer. My hands shook as I compared that original deed to the so-called transfer document on file, one dated April 15, 2022, and allegedly signed by my grandfather. As Frank pulled out a faded printout, I stared closely at the signature. Something was off. The signature on the transfer lacked the characteristic looping, G, and bold final strokes my grandfather was known for. I needed more than a hunch, I needed evidence. I rushed home and dove into the archives stored in my grandfather's old metal filing cabinet. Among yellowed pages and battered notebooks, I discovered hospital records. My grandfather had been admitted for a serious stroke in early April 2022. The records made it abundantly clear, during that period, his right hand was too weak to even hold a pen. The contradiction was undeniable. The document was a forgery. As the gravity of the situation sank in, I reached out to my neighbors. I had always admired the strong sense of community in Maple Grove, where every face was familiar and every story intertwined. At a small impromptu gathering at the local diner, I met Linda and Karen, two longtime residents who shared their own experiences with the Sycamore Ridge HOA. Linda tearfully recalled how the HOA had unjustly fined her for minor infractions, while Karen mentioned an inexplicable surge in maintenance fees that vanished into a black hole of mismanaged funds. It became clear that Margaret Holloway was not only targeting my farm, she had been playing dirty with many of us. That very evening, I attended a secret meeting organized by several outraged homeowners. The meeting was held in the back room of a quaint coffee shop, lit only by the soft glow of vintage lamps. In that room, I found allies who were as passionate about protecting our community as I was about saving my family's legacy. The air was thick with determination as we exchanged our grievances, forged documents, outrageous fines, and a host of shady dealings that had become all too common under Margaret's rule. We mapped out a strategy. First, we would compile every piece of evidence, from my grandfather's hospital records to the original deed tucked away in those dusty files. Then, we planned to bring in an expert, a geology professor from a local state university, to conduct an independent survey of the land. His analysis would not only challenge the HOA's claims about the value of the limestone deposits, but also serve as a key piece of evidence in our legal challenge. Over the next few days, my phone buzzed nonstop with messages from neighbors and fellow farmers. Everyone was eager to share their own stories of how the HOA had wronged them. One neighbor, Mark, mentioned that his driveway had been blocked multiple times by construction equipment that never seemed to be there during the day. Another, Sarah, admitted she had discovered that funds collected for community improvements were mysteriously missing from the HOA's accounts. As our evidence piled up, the atmosphere in the community grew more charged. We set up a rotating watch at my farm, a beloved property that was now under siege. I spent countless nights sitting on the creaking porch of my farmhouse, watching as shadows danced under the moonlight, wondering if Margaret's enforcers might make another surprise appearance. Then, one fateful morning, I noticed something unsettling. A drone buzzed overhead, its camera trained on the eastern fields, the very area the HOA was set to excavate. I confronted the men stationed there, demanding to see their permits. Their dismissive responses only deepened my suspicion that something nefarious was unfolding. They insisted they were merely following orders, but I knew they were part of a larger, well-orchestrated plan to bulldoze the land away from me and the community. With my evidence in hand, I scheduled a meeting with a local attorney known for taking on corrupt organizations. He reviewed the documents and, after a long pause, told me that if we could prove the forgery, we might stand a chance in court. "We'll need every scrap of evidence you have," he urged. And so, I doubled down on my efforts. Late one night, when the air was thick with anticipation and a hint of danger, I sat in the quiet of my study reviewing every document once more. The gentle hum of the wind outside was the only sound as I relived the painful memories of my childhood, summers spent in the orchard, evenings under starry skies, and the laughter of family echoing through the fields. I couldn't let that legacy be stolen away by greed and corruption. The day of the showdown finally arrived. Armed with a binder full of documents, hospital records, and the geology professor's report, I walked to the county courthouse. The evidence was overwhelming: a forged signature, contradictory records, and testimonies from multiple neighbors all pointed to a deliberate fraud perpetrated by the HOA. As I presented my case, a murmur of disbelief spread through the courtroom. How could someone sign away such an invaluable piece of family history? The judge's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized the documents. Outside the courthouse, the media had gathered. Reporters and local news vans were everywhere, cameras flashing as they captured the moment. I stood at the front, my heart pounding as I recounted the ordeal. I spoke not only for myself, but for all those who had been victimized by the HOA's overreach. My words, infused with passion and a deep-seated determination to protect what was rightfully ours, resonated with the community and the wider public. As the case unfolded, it became clear that the corrupt practices extended far beyond my property. The county's transportation department, embarrassed by its inadvertent involvement in the scheme, announced a revision of their rural development plans. Even Margaret Holloway's staunchest supporters within the HOA began to waver under the weight of mounting evidence. It wasn't long before her partner in crime, a relative who had managed the HOA's finances, was implicated in embezzlement and fraud. In the final twist of our battle, the judge ruled in our favor, declaring the forged document null and void. The mineral rights remained with my family, and the planned excavation was halted indefinitely. Margaret Holloway was forced to step down as president of the HOA, and several of her associates faced criminal charges. I remember feeling a mix of relief and empowerment as the news broke. Not only had I saved my family's land, but I had also sparked a broader movement for transparency and accountability within our community. The victory wasn't just mine, it belonged to every neighbor who had rallied behind the cause. In the months that followed, we transformed the anger and betrayal into something beautiful. With the funds that were recovered from the mismanaged HOA accounts, we launched a community initiative to restore the farm's neglected orchard and create a shared space for local gatherings. The farm became a symbol of resilience and unity, a reminder that when people stand together, even the most corrupt systems can be overthrown. Today, as I walk through the restored fields of Maple Grove, I'm reminded of my grandfather's words. This land has a spirit of its own, and it will always fight back. And fight back it did. I've learned that community unity, proper documentation, and a refusal to accept injustice are powerful weapons against corruption. My journey taught me that sometimes the only way to honor the past is to fight for the future, and that the legacy of those we love is worth every battle. Thank you for joining me on this wild ride. Remember, if you ever find yourself up against impossible odds, trust in your community, gather your evidence, and never, ever let anyone steal your story.